Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity video. In this one, it's not actually going to be a tutorial as such. It's going to be a game devlog, so I'm going to be talking about how the game I'm currently working on is going, showing you, some of the code behind the scenes, and it's just going to be a discussion about game architecture and some tips you can use in your game to improve how you design it, reduce, repeated code, reduce code in general. If you can reduce code to do the same job by using the Unity built-in systems, it's better most of the time. Obviously that's not strictly true all the time, but I'll get into that. I'll be showing you a talk by a game developer called Ryan Hipple, who you might have heard of. He's done talks on game architecture and design, and I've implemented one of his systems that he's done a talk on before, and he's got a blog post about it, so I'm going to be talking about all that, and yeah, we might as well get into it. So before that, I want to thank my patrons, so a special thanks to Michael, Remy Baldwin and Phil Baum for their donations on Patreon this month. If anyone else is able to help support the community, then the link is in the description below and it would help a lot. But let's just get into the video. So first of all, I'll just show you what I've got going so far, and then I'll start with all the talking about architecture and design. So normally, when you make a game, you might just go in there and be like, all right, I want some movement. So you'll code some movement. You start prototyping everything out. But then when you decide, all right, I want to make this a proper game, then you got to actually think about design, because for example, if you're making an ability system, you don't want to write code for every single ability in the game. You can do that, but it would just make your life hell. And then if you want to change stuff, you have to then do inheritance of all those different classes. But it'd be much easier to just use component-based design, which I've already mentioned before what it is, but it's going to be even more important in this video. We're going to be using event-driven design as such. I'll get into that anyway. Let's show you. So press start, fades to black, fades back in, loading screen, loading bar, fades back in. I'm going to purposely say out loud every system I've implemented just to show you all the little bits that add up together and how it's all linked. So player 1, select a character. This is a mobile game for context if you haven't seen it already. So the point is, it's obviously not it's not a monitor resolution, it's 2340 by 1080. So the point is, it's a not co-op game, it's like a local multiplayer game, so you play against someone else on either end of your phone. Now, obviously this benefits longer phones, but I've played some games like this and they're quite fun. I thought it'd be quite fun to make. I can always change certain bits later on and to be more user-friendly on more square shaped design resolutions. But anyway, the point is, player 1's on this side of the phone and player 2's on this side. So player 1, select a character. I've currently got 5. The game is based on a D&D campaign that I've my first ever one with my friends, and that's why I've got the motivation to make this game. So all the characters and references are all going to be to that. So obviously they're not going to be widely known references, but the point is it's going to be quite fun for me and my friends, and obviously anyone else can get the game and play it, and it's still going to have gameplay for everyone. And the point is, for now I've put placeholder names for the different characters, so just basically what they are. So I'm going to lock in one character, then notice how the character I locked in, the button goes deactive. I can't click on it. The lock-in button goes deactive when I've locked in. The description goes away. Then I click on someone else, and then now the lock-in button's active. I click it, it locks in, it fades to black. Loading screen, fades back in. Then when it fades back in, we've got the two characters. I did a video on a camera like this. Coins collected more than your opponent to emerge victorious. 3, 2, 1. And then when the timer goes, it starts with a 10-second timer because I just made it 10 seconds for now. I can move by using the joystick. The joysticks control each individual character. And then I have abilities, which I am yet to make. That's going to be something I'll start tonight, actually. Once you've done, it'll go to the next level, but there aren't actually any next levels, so it goes back to the menu. So that's currently what I've got, the game loop working. I just need to add, obviously, content like abilities and actual ways to win levels and stuff like that. But as a general thing, that's the game. And what I'm going to show you, or talk about and explain, is the design behind it. So, because I know quite a lot of people are quite intrigued about that kind of thing. They'll know how to code and make some game stuff, but they want to know how proper games are made. Now, I'm not saying this is a proper professional game, at least, well, it's not yet. I plan on perhaps releasing it to Google Play at some point. I've already got a Google Play license. I could release it right now, but obviously I want to add quite a lot more before I even put it on there. So first of all, I'll show you some of the code, and then I'll tie that in with this talk I've got open. I'll link this in the description below after the video. I'll try and remember to do it. If I forget, someone message me and I'll add it in the comments and pin it, but I should remember. Actually, I could always just put it in the description afterwards. Anyway, I can edit it. So the general rules about this design: 1, all references, or most, as many as possible, all references should be kept within a prefab. And what I mean by that is, you should never have in a scene a prefab here with a public field where you have to drag in another object in the scene to that field. And the reason's because the main reason for that, there's plenty of reasons, but the main reason is because if you ever want to test a specific thing in your game, you want to be able to go into a debug scene, like just a random scene with no content, and just drag that prefab in and press play and test the system. You want everything to be able to work in isolation. If you drag something in and you press play and it says null reference error, that's a bad thing. Now, I don't currently have that system fully working. Like, there are certain things that I'll press play and it'll say, no, you're missing this. And I can fix those things, obviously, with this design. But one problem I've had in my old games I've worked on in the past is, yeah, you'll have one system that relies on another, that relies on another, that relies on another. So you'll drag it into the scene, you'll press play, and then it'll be like, oh, you're missing that one, alright, so I drag in that prefab, you press play. Oh, you're missing this thing that uses that, so you drag that in, and it gets a mess. You want to be able to be like, alright, I want to drag in the scene changer without any other things in the scene, and just have it, well, not give you an error. And then maybe you have something else, like the character spawner, you want to drag that in, and you want it to just not throw an error on its own, and then if you add the things it needs to work, then it should start working. You don't want errors just from dropping in prefabs, basically. So I will show you the talk, or like not the actual talk, but bits about this blog post. So if we scroll down, it's about using scriptable objects as events. So in Unity, you might be used to using events, maybe you're not, but events are generally a good thing. So if I just went into like a random bit of code and just scroll to the bottom, it's just an enum. So if I went down here and I had a public class something, and it's of type mono behavior. Obviously, I'll undo this when I'm done if it lets me import. Okay, so the point is it's a mono behavior, and then if I made an event, so public event, you probably want to make it static so you can reference it, and then I could call it perhaps like on player selected or on character selected, right? On player died. It's up to you. You'll have events for things happening in your game. Now, this is a good thing in general. You know, you have an event. Okay, yeah, you can't just put the name like that. That's because I have... so public, obviously, accessible from anywhere. Static, there's only one type of it. So if you reference the class, you can reference this variable. The way I've used it is like this. So you put action, which needs system. And we call it on player died. And this is an event with no parameters. If you want parameters, you inside these braces, these like greater than less than, you can put in the type. So for example, if you wanted to put in an integer, you would put int there, and it would mean that when you invoke this, you have to pass in an integer. And how events work is, rather than saying when you die on the player, say, all right, the player's died, go tell the end game screen thing to like play its animation, and go tell the enemies to stop chasing, and go tell this to do that, and go tell this to do that. What you want to do is you just want to say as the player, hey guys, I've died. Then anyone who is in, well, there's different words. There's subscribed, anyone who's listening, the listeners, the subscribers. Basically, anyone who cares about on player died will do their own code in their own class. Because the general rule about like game design is each class should do one job and do it well. So, for example, I mean, this isn't a class, it's just an enum, so we can ignore that. But I'll go show you a class. So, for example, I have the player input class. Now this class literally just handles stuff about the player input. Now it's not perfect, I've just kind of, made it quickly and it works. So it knows what player it is. Now obviously this is part of the prefab, so I select which player it is. The reason I've used player 1 and 2 is because otherwise I have to use integers, and the problem with using integers is you can enter the wrong one. With enums, you can't enter the wrong one. So I think, even though it's like a pretty pointless enum in the sense that there's only 2 values, also I do realize if I didn't put these numbers in, that would default to 0 and that would default to 1. But I want to keep, if I ever added a third player or like added something before it or something, I don't want these indexes to mess up, so it's just safer to do that. But on the player input, it knows which player it is. It has reference to the characters holder, which is just a scriptable object with a list of characters, and that's so that without actually needing to call functions and pass characters around, when the characters are selected in the character selection screen, they get put into this characters list, and it's non-serialized because by default scriptable objects, when you set them and when you press play, set them and stop play, they'll be saved. And I don't when the player turns off the game, I don't want it to know or store like what characters are selected, or when I build the game, I don't want it to like accidentally have the characters selected that I was last testing as. If it's non-serialized, it just means that this list is only at runtime, in the sense when I stop playing, it doesn't store anything. If I go and find for you the actual physical scriptable object, because scriptable objects are just what's that? Where have I put it? Main character holder. If I press show in Explorer and go to this asset, you can see all the data in it if I bring it across the move screen. That's all the data the prefab holds, the scriptable object, sorry. Nowhere in here does it actually seem to store the list of characters. There's no like list of characters, anything like that. Whereas if I made that just normal public or whatever, then it would appear on there, so that when I press play, it loads it from this, it would know what it is. Ignore the fact it's mono behavior. It's not a mono behavior, it's a scriptable object, but that's just how they store those. Obviously, I can explain most of this to you. I don't know what hide object flags is or whatever, but I know obviously enabled. Obviously, so the thing is, scriptable objects can't be enabled. Mono behaviors have, so they've clearly got some overlap here. Script instance, and obviously the name. So it's got some data on the scriptable object. Like that's all the data it has. We could find a more complex one. Like for example, I have data which is serialized on a scriptable object. So if I go to character data and pick like a character and open that one up, you'll notice how it does store the character's name, the description, their color in RGB, their sprite, which is just an ID inside my project so that it knows which sprite it's referencing. Same with the prefabs. These are the two prefab references, IDs. So this is stuff which is saved between play sessions, because obviously this doesn't even change when you press play. Like these character settings are just data that is, before you build the game. They don't change ever. Whereas the list of characters that are selected will change every time you press play, So I want to use it as a scriptable object because it saves me having to pass it around everywhere. And one other part of the design is, I will in the past have said use singletons. Singletons are good, right? You can reference them from anywhere. That's true to some extent, but in reality, singletons also have negatives, which, it's like a big divide. Some people say they're good because they're so simple and easy to set up, which is true. They're much easier to set up, but they're also bad just because you're limited. Well, one, if you have a reference to a singleton, then it needs to be in the scene. Now, some people have a workaround for this, where if you referenced a singleton, in this entire game, I only have one singleton, which is the screen fader, and that's simply because this scene fader, well, not the scene fader, sorry, the level changer, this level changer needs to persist through scenes, because otherwise it wouldn't work. You need to load the other scene to fade in, fade to black, load the other scene, fade back in. This is the only singleton, and another thing is, I manually place this level changer prefab scene changer. I could call it level changer. I place that in every scene. The reason's because I want to be able to press play from any scene. If I go to character selection, what will happen is I can select characters, but when it goes, it will just take me back to the main menu. And the reason's because when I press start game, that is when the actual levels are chosen. Now I could change that. I could actually make it so the levels are chosen on this screen, meaning I can actually press play on the character selection screen and just go into the game, which is probably a good idea. I could make it so that the levels are actually chosen and shuffled as soon as you've finished locking in. That's probably a good idea. I'll try and note that, but my point still stands. If I have this in every scene, but because I've made it a singleton, which has destroy if there's already an instance of it. When I go to a new scene that already has it in, it just it gets rid of it, so it's fine. This script literally just handles going to a level. Now I've put the levels in an enum. Currently this is what I have. I've put 0 and 1 for those, and then I've gone from 10 upwards for the actual mini games. And that's simply because when I want to go between levels, by default in Unity, scene changing is string referencing, and string referencing is bad just because you can type something wrong and get errors. At least with enums, you can't get errors because you have to select one of the enums. That's one good thing about them. So what I've done is I pass in a string, because you still have to do that, but it tries to parse it into an enum, basically saying, is there an enum with this exact string? If there is, cool, go to that level. Otherwise, it debug.log errors telling me that doesn't exist, which means when I'm testing, I know, oh, I've spelt something wrong somewhere. But in reality, I shouldn't really pass a string in many places at all. It should be done in code. When I go between levels, if I go show you a minigame data thing, the minigame scriptable object that stores the name, the task, the duration, where the player spawns with their rotation and such, this actually tells you which minigame it's referencing, which I could put as a string, but as I said, If it's a string, the problem is I could type it wrong. The good thing about everything referencing an enum is if I spelt it wrong, it's because I spelt it wrong in one place. So I could go into my levels enum and just, change the spelling if I'd spelt it wrong. But because because if I had string reference here and then I had a string reference over here and a string reference here, I would have to go through and change it in all the places. So that's one good tip, is use enums. Not literally everywhere, but they're very good to replace string references. One note is if you ever have an event like a Unity event and you have a function you're calling that takes in an enum, you can't actually do that through here. So you would have to enter a string and have it convert into an enum. It's not ideal. You can probably get something from the asset store that does that. Someone's probably made an enum serializer or something, but I actually haven't bothered with that. I might look into that. So the main bit of the design that I should get into now, we're about halfway through the video, maybe before halfway, I don't know. It's going to be a long video, yeah. Is that events in Unity that I was on about earlier that I got rid of, saying, hey, I know about this. The one problem is, when you want to listen for an event, you have to hard code it. Normally, you have to say in your player thing or in your enemy, hey, listen for when the so if this was in like an enemy script, you would be like, when you start, you would subscribe by doing blah 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 class dot blah 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 event plus equals my function, which would be basically saying when that event is called, also call my function. But the problem with that is you're still hard referencing it through code, which means that if that thing doesn't exist in the scene, you're going to get problems, and there's plenty of problems with that. Because if you want to add new things happening, then you have to write new code, and your like goal in design when it comes to coding is code the functions, and obviously call them. You should be only calling functions inside your prefab, inside the script, or other scripts on your prefab. So one good example of this is if I go to the character selection, I have a prefab called character selection handler, which has two scripts, one that handles the actual character selection stuff, and one that handles the UI. I could put them all in one script, but I split it out so it's less code in one place, and it's all, it does its own thing. So what does the actual selection handler do? Well, it knows, it has reference to the, the holder where we set the characters, so it can do that itself. This is where it gets set. It knows all the characters in the game, like all that I have, so I've put them all in here as scriptable objects: Blueberry, Bob, Cassandra, Nix, Rana. It stores events, which I'm going to get into, on character lock-in and on players locked-in, like on all players locked-in, basically finished, Notice how these are different events, I'll show you that. We store reference to the UI, so we can tell it, do this. I only actually call that once, I think, which is like, I call it twice, but even then, on characters, the UI, reset for lock-in. I could even do this for events. I could try and get rid of the reference between the thing in the UI, but this is okay. I'd say it's okay having a hard reference to another class, so long as it's on the same prefab, because then you'll never have a case where they're not together. You don't want references across prefabs. You want references inside prefabs, which is good. That's fine to have. So the UI handles... it takes in all the characters when you set it up, and then it spawns a button for them all and the preview of the spinning character for them all. And then the reason I set the name here is to the character's name is just because by default it appends like clone to the end of all the names. If you instantiate a prefab, it'll say blah 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 clone, and I was getting problems with it not knowing which player's which, but it's fine. Reset for lock-in says obviously players is 0 and 1 for like, if I go to players, player 1 is 0, player 2 is 1, just how indexing works. So I need to add 1 into that. So it says player 1, please select a character, and then it does the thing, and then when it's done, it says player 2, select a character. So obviously I use the same function to do the selecting for both the characters. I don't have to write separate code because you don't want to do that. It's just duplicating code. This is all UI stuff. Now, how the event system works I've been on about. Notice how when I've been clicking on these prefabs, I've got these event things, these listeners. So how I'm doing the actual events and listening is by external scripts, like scripts that aren't inside. I'm not writing code inside the selection handler to tell it to listen for an event. I'm writing code on the prefab saying it cares about the event, because then that means that I don't have to write code when adding new functionality. A good example of this is when the player dies, you don't want to code in all these other systems, oh yeah, listen for when the player dies. You want to just, as the designer, go onto the prefab for like, I don't know, when the player dies, what do you want to do? Well, some games, when the player dies, you have your game over screen, you have your respawn, you have maybe save the game or load the game. You got all these different things to happen. You don't want to call them from code. You want to call them from these like generic kind of events. Now, look on the scene changer. I've got 3 of these. Now, I might design this in a different way at some point, but how these event listeners work, I'll get into the code in a second. But the level changer, I never call anywhere in code saying level changer dot instance dot change level. I give it all these events for these different occasions when it should change level. So there's no code actually knowing about the level changer. So, for example, void listener. Void just means obviously no parameters. It listens for the event on game start. I'll get into how you make that. So we listen for it on game start. So when on game start happens, we do all these Unity events. So I say scene changer dot go to that level character selection. Now obviously I said don't use string references. You have to in these events. Enums don't work as I mentioned. But what happens is as soon as it calls that anyway, that go to level, it converts it into an enum and tells me if it's wrong. So I know it's right, and it's saved in the prefab, so I shouldn't ever have to type that in anywhere else. It's fine to have a few string references in places, but keep it to a minimum. On all players locked in, so I'm also listening for when all the players are locked in. When all the players are locked in, go to the next level. And I'm also saying when a minigame timer ends, when the minigame's done, go to the next level. Now you might think, oh, this would get hectic if you had loads and loads and loads. Well, to be honest, at least in my case, I won't have more than this. I only want to go to a new level in these 3 situations. There should never be another case to go to another level, you know? It's like a minigame based game anyway. On bigger games, you want more events, but don't think that means it's inefficient, because all these scripts they have an on enable and an on disable, and then on arrays. But to be honest, they don't have an update function or anything. There's nothing going on every frame. There's just something that gets called when it starts and when it stops. So that code, I haven't written it. Obviously, I got it from him. It's not like shameful to copy code, because in this case, I mean, first of all, I actually did take into consideration how it works and what it does. I've actually extended on his version of it. Here's his version of it. So what it basically is a scriptable object, game event, a list of listeners, and a raise function. So that's the same if you've already used the built-in event system of, having listeners, and raising means invoking. And all it does is it goes through all the listeners and, calls it on event raised. Now, I can show you my code. I could even give you... Well, no, I'm going to do a separate video on this, actually setting up the design. So you guys let me know if you actually want to see a separate video on this. I'm not going to... this video is already 22 minutes. So I will do a dedicated video to showing how to set this up with all the code. But a brief thing is, you'll start off with a void event, because void event's the most simple. It has no parameters. And I have a void event in one of my scripts. I have it all over the place, probably. So for example, I have in level changer a void event on screen finish fading in. And all I do is in my own code, when I finish fading in, I say, hey, I finished fading in. So rather than saying, all right, what do I need to think about? When I've faded in, I need to tell this to do this and that to do that. I just say, nah, I don't care about what else happens. I just say, I finished fading in. And same with, I have a minigame data event on minigame level loaded, which gets called here as soon as we go to a new level. As soon as the actual scene's loaded, I will say, hey, the minigame level's loaded. So what that'll do is anything that cares about the minigame level loaded will have a listener on the object. So the character selection cares about this. When a character is selected, we call these 2 functions. We say select character and new display the character selection. So the UI does one thing and the actual handler does the other. And this on character selected object, I've just made it. I've gone right click, new create, game event, and I've got all these different types. Now, by default, you'll just have a void event, which is no parameters, but you'll realize in your game when you have events, at some points you want to pass data through, you want to have parameters to pass through. So you have to make slight alterations to your code, and I'll show you how to do that in another video. But basically, all these events, I just add a new one every time I have a new data type I need to make an event for. Now, you might think, oh, making new scripts every time you need a new data type. Well, one, you shouldn't really need new data types very often anyway. At the start, you might need a few, like transform, vector free. The ones you use a lot, but in reality, you shouldn't have that many. And even if you do, it's very easy to add. You add about 10 lines of new code rather than going in and hard coding references in your script. It's much better. So in my actual game, this is probably the best. In the actual mini game that I've got going. There's no actual mini game yet, but that's fine. So notice how when I press play earlier, if you remember, what happens is it fades in. It says, this is the level, 3, 2, 1, go. When it says go, the player input gets activated. There's no code I've written to say, hey, activate the player input when this happens. What I actually have is I've set up all those little systems, but I've connected them through prefabs rather than through code references, because it's, then I can just delete one and the other thing still works. So a good example of that is if I press play, notice how it all works, right, when I get there. So if I say go, it loads, select 2 characters. Now notice how it'll fade in a second, it'll fade in. And then coins, I'm obviously going to change the names and stuff. 3, 2, 1, that's all done using animation. And then this fades in and then that timer starts and I can start moving. Alright, now normally if you deleted one of those things, your code would just break, because it would be like, it would get to a line where it has to execute some code, call a function, it would be like, hey, null reference error, that thing's missing. So if I've done this right, what should actually happen is if I go to the minigame countdown handler, right, if I just like delete it, now obviously it's a prefab, so I'm just going to make sure I've got it all applied. Alright, if I delete this countdown handler and I save and go back, in reality, if I've done this right, I've not actually tested this, but I'm pretty certain, obviously it's not going to work because I've deleted the countdown handler, but what should happen is I shouldn't get any errors. It should just run like normal without the actual countdown handler happening. See? The game, there's no errors. I'm obviously missing part of the code that does something, but no, it's not throwing any errors in the console because everything is loosely coupled. It's not tightly coupled together. So obviously, oh yeah, it's not going to do the countdown, and I'm just going to sit in the scene forever because the code handling that is gone. But the only reason that code was getting called wasn't because there were other functions saying, oh, get that and call that function on it. If I get the countdown handler back and chuck it in here, and it exists now, right? This was specifically listening for that when the screen finishes fading in, start the minigame intro, which was all its own code. So the actual screen fader doesn't have to know about this, whatever. And the reason I don't do it on start is because if I did it on start, the scene technically starts before it's finished fading out. And the problem is if I, start playing animation as the screen's fading from black, you'll miss most of it due to the actual screen fading. So I want to wait until the screen's finished fading. But originally I didn't have an event for when the screen's finished fading, but I knew when I got to this point, I want to know when the screen finishes fading. So you simply just go in to your code where you want to add the event, and you just add in a new void event, which is what I'll do in another video. You write your thing on screen finish fading in and just say invoke it. So your code, when you want to add a new thing, it should be a one-liner, just add in a new thing. So yeah, this video has obviously gone quite a bit, but I'm going to link this in the description below. I'm going to do another video on the event system, setting it up for you guys, so I hope you look forward to that. If you want to see it, then obviously tell me below, but I'll probably definitely do it anyway. Then I'll get back to doing my characters, like from Overwatch or whatever games, just give me some more character ideas. Yeah, I think that's it, to be honest. If you want to see more like game design architecture things, then obviously message me, maybe with the actual game design architecture you want to see, because there's plenty of them. Or just, ask me to do more like updates on my game and stuff as I keep developing it. I want to just hear what you guys want to see and hear. So yeah, I guess we'll end the video there. So if you haven't already, obviously leave a like and subscribe, it'd mean a lot. Join the Discord server if you haven't already, and if you'd want to. Help me on Patreon if all possible, it'd mean a lot to me. But apart from that, thanks for watching, and goodbye.